Otherwise they would not probably understand, and there were different concepts that was coming there. And surprisingly, on the other end, we found that the rest of the teams, they themselves started saying, no, this is not the same with our case. We would go back and proactively talk to our customers. They definitely listen. We only need to bring in a certain value or showcase them certain aspects which were there. And that began a very interesting conversation. We had multiple set of people in that. It's not just about a gender diversity balance that I'm talking about, but people who had recently joined the organization, people who had tenured over there. So diversity in all aspects which were there. But we found that the entire learning, the interesting conversations that came out was really, really rich in, and beautiful, I would say, in terms of each participant felt very well. So what I feel that the connecting part between the workplace diversity, as we call it, and learning is, we learn to empathize with the people who come from various backgrounds. When working and learning with people from variety of backgrounds and cultures who are there in a singular class, it's very comprehensive to understand the subject matter, because each person comes with different talents, different ideas, different opinions. So that openness to new ideas, getting a better comprehension, I would say, and people feel very comfortable and safe in an entire set of people who are there. And that interaction can take it to a wider range of social groups, as well as more feeling more confident later in themselves when they're interacting with others. So I would say promoting creativity, innovation, or open communication, coming out of those inhibitions which may be there, sharing the viewpoints, all of these are positive impacts when we have a diverse audience. And it's not just about influencing, or let's say diversity alone, but I would also say that learning from different genders, cultures, generations, and the like are also helping people to be more inclusive. And that brings in a cohesive and a beautiful team, as they would say. And speaking of inclusivity, I also would like to highlight here, there was an interesting survey that I read, which came from Deloitte. And they had asked a question to people about inclusion in how much is it essential for engaging and retaining people. And it's a beautiful result, or I was really surprised to read 80% of the respondents actually said inclusion is important when choosing an employer. 39% of people actually said they would leave their current organization for a more inclusive one. And 23% of respondents actually indicated that they have already left the organization for a better inclusive one. And out of all this, 30% were millennials. So that shows that people are more open today. They really want to learn from people. It is a globalization which is definitely there when it comes to organization. We are no more only connected with a smaller society where we live. So it definitely creates a big impact in learning. And there is a connectivity there between the workplace diversity and learning.
Right. So thank you for that answer. And what I understood was that empathy plays a key role when you talk about inclusion and as well as learning, because you're more tolerant of your colleague sitting next to you. And that is the kind of conversation which has been going on globally. So over the session, we'll learn a little bit more about the learning and development initiatives and how to build competencies and the different learning modes. So Sujatha, coming to the next question, and before we do that, I would like to ask the participants to ask us as many questions as possible to make this session as fruitful. You have a chat box below and you have a Q&A section below, so you can use any one of them and just type out your question, and we'll take them up as we go. So coming to the next question, what are some of the changes taking place within the space of learning with respect to learning modes and competencies, etc.?
That's a great question. I think it touches my heart as a learning professional, and thank you for asking that. First of all, the way I believe learning is a fulcrum when it comes to an organization. So we speak about the triad of an organization, which is people, process and technology. And if you look at it, when processes change, you definitely need to learn. When technology changes, again, you need to learn. When people move on from one role to another, or maybe they take on different additional responsibilities, or for that matter, they are also coming from a different organization or moving organizations, there also there's a lot of learning which takes place. So from a learning perspective, if you were to say, key things are the content, the delivery, and the competencies. While there are much more portfolios, let me keep it to this in line with the theme that we have today. So from a learning perspective, from a content design perspective, in the initial traditional days, we used to have something called content centric, which essentially meant that we go to the subject matter experts, ask them what is it that the learners should be provided as a curriculum, create that content, and then provide it in the delivery, whether it is delivered in a session virtually or face-to-face, or maybe as an e-learning. Then came a mode where it became more and more learner centric, which essentially meant we wanted to understand what the learners are wanting to learn with respect to their aspirations, what their needs are, what do they need to know right now to be able to perform. And therefore, just in time learning also is a concept which became very popular during this time. And that is where the learning content really got built. And today, if you look at it, it's all with the dynamically changing landscape, with the modern learning focuses actually on the business-centric learning, which essentially means the needs of the customer are changing. And to be able to meet those and also to align whatever learning we have to the business goals and the needs, we typically look at a four-prong approach. So what is it for an individual, for the team, for the organization, and for the customer? So design thinking, for example, is a very great thing that is creating a lot of impact while creating the content. So that's on the content side of it. Now, how do people learn? Delivery also, traditionally it used to be classroom sessions. From there, we moved on to e-learning, which could be even as asynchronous or synchronous for that matter. That essentially means either people are trying to um, you know, learn during, just gives me a moment. I'm sorry about it. Synchronous would be when they are in a classroom where they are interacting. Asynchronous would be more of where they could go back and apply for a course, but there is something there wherein they can look at the videos and then interact with people also, but it's a offline mode that they have. So those are also available. And there is also places where you have adaptive learning. So I'm currently pursuing certain courses from Josh Bussin Academy. It's beautiful because for me, I feel I can go at my pace. I can go and learn. I can go and interact with people. There are videos inbuilt. There are questions which make you reflect. So all of these really make a lot of difference. And people come from various industries. And that makes the learning much more richer because you are understanding different concepts which comes from, or thought processes and ideas which come from various industries. And you might just know about your own industry or what you're working with, but knowing something from different is really, really enriching. The third part, I would say, is on the competencies, as you were trying to say. With the changing landscape, earlier, people used to have defined very detailed competencies. And I just want to bring in for people who may be new to this area of competencies. Skill is something where we could actually, what is it that I need to be able to work? But when it comes to competency, it is more from the level of knowledge I have in applying those. So for example, I may have a basic level knowledge to do something, or I may be on the other end expert. So that competency to define takes a lot of time. Whereas today, if you look at it with all the changes and ambiguity which is there, the VUCA world, as you call, the volatility, uncertainty, complexities, and ambiguity, along with the diverse disruption which has happened in the industry. Today, it's something like you have to be learning within quicker, timelines which are there. So what I would say as an example is for a fresher training, if you take from an IT industry where I'm coming from, typically you call people, where you have the project trainees or the freshers who join the organization. Traditionally, they would go under a 3-month training period because the curriculum are different from what they have learned academic versus what's required in the organization. Then they are put through to a practical project where they get hands-on experience, and then they move on to shadowing of a project, the real-time project, where they have support from other people, and slowly they gain that expertise and then they start on their own. So it may take anything between 9 to 12 months for them to start actually applying their own skills on their own. Whereas today we don't have that much of time. So what we do is we look at it from a problem-centric approach, give them a real-time problem, give them all the entire resources, for example, learning content, where they can apply those, create smaller cohorts so they can learn peer-to-peer, and also a dedicated mentor who will give them all the directions as to how they need to go. Of course, there are trainings in between in terms of the areas where they don't know completely, it is a novice area, then there would be training. But broadly, they would be looking at, instead of saying, I'm going to learn something, they would say, I'm going to solve a problem. So that hands-on and experience really comes in quicker. And there are times where people have actually moved from 3 to 4 weeks and quickly start, it enables them to start working on a project. So those are some of the changes that has actually come into the picture when it comes to learning per se.
Right. So when we talk about, you talked a little about classroom learning, and I remember when we used to, learn only in that mode, and now we have so many different modes available in front of us, which goes to show you that not one mode is better than the other. It's just everybody's ability which counts, right? Which brings me to the next question. As you can see nowadays, there's a multi-generational workforce, right? So, and they have their own competencies and their own abilities.
Yeah.
So what is the most important in an inclusive culture when you especially think about multi-generational workforce?
That's indeed a very interesting question here. I would think, to me personally, if I were to look at something, creating a culture within an organization, or trying to see, especially when you have an organization where you have tenured people and new generation coming in, three critical aspects come into my mind. One is authenticity. Where there is authenticity, people are very, very comfortable, because it's like being in their own self, leveraging their own unique gifts and talents and sharing perspectives. So if in a classroom, I've had situations when I can share another experience here. I was going through the coaching session where I'm an international certified coach. And when I was trying to get that certification and I was in the classes, we had most of the people were working. They were in the range of at least 30, 35 to even to the extent of 60. We had just one student in the class, one learner who was a peer. She was just 20 years old, just after her graduation. Now, we in the classroom, when there are different concepts that is taught to us, we also pair up between people to practice, those elements which are taught. So there was a session where, and after that practice, we come back and share our experiences. So when we were paired for these exercises, the 20-year-old was paired with a 55-year-old gentleman. He was also a veteran from US. This young girl was from India. And we found that, after the entire session was there, and when we came back to share, the first person who actually wanted to share his experience was this gentleman, who actually said, I was really shocked because I had certain set perceptions in my mind about certain activities, but the way she was asking me questions and making me reflect on different things, I'm really, really overwhelmed about, the type of opportunities that may come up, or the different ways I can possibly look at opportunities in the current environment. So that itself shows that there is definitely a lot to learn. There's a clear balance of the experience versus the digital skills that today's digital natives bring together can be combined to make a huge power. But that authenticity has to be there. You need to be your own self to be able to even accept and say, yes, I know this, or I don't know this. This is what I can share, and I should be able to be open. So that's the first point I would say. Second to me is flexibility. Now, understanding something which is our strengths and playing to the strengths is one part, but we also need to understand our weaknesses and where we need to ask for help as well. So flexibility actually provides people that opportunity to be more engaged and focus on the outcome. So we are not really looking at people per se and trying to say, but how do we get a particular work done in a specific period of time in the quality that is given. So when we're focusing from that, people actually come back, they're more engaged, they take ownership of the work which is there, because it's a common goal now that we need to really go back and complete this activity to be successful. So that flexibility also really provides a lot of engagement among learners. And if you look at even the third and most important element that I would really think is the purpose part of it, where there's a great impact if I know what is the big picture, what am I going to achieve on, what is the direction I'm moving, and even if I move away from the direction, I can do a course correction and come back. So that really helps me to have, okay, this is my final purpose, what I want to achieve, or what am I going to create a value on. So these three things I would feel are the most important in an inclusive culture, if you were to say, where you have different generation workforce.
And the story which you shared was quite intriguing and fun to see that a pair which has such a big generational gap would, I think, outperform others, if I'm not wrong. Uh, and the interesting thing is, when I see my niece and nephews, they have a very different mindset, and they're very open to changes, as opposed to us. We are set in our ways.
Absolutely. And the key thing is also the curiosity which is there. As a child, we are very curious. We're not really, it's a interesting fact that, we don't look at failures at that time. We fall, we get up, we run. We don't really bother about anything. Even if we have disagreements with our friends, for example, maybe maximum you might be not talking to them for a day or two, but then after that, everything is open and again we go back. But as we grow into an adult, a lot of these inhibitions come into our mind, and we have our own perceptions. We want it in a certain way. We are more comfortable in a certain way. And that's what really takes us in a step backward when it comes to curiosity. But that's another key attribute that we need in today's times.
Right, absolutely. So we can learn a little something from the younger generation.
Absolutely.
So before I go into the next question, I would request the audience members to ask us questions, because after that we're going to go straight into the Q&A section. Uh, so yeah, feel free to ask whatever you have in your mind. So the next question is, what are some of the future skills and competencies we may need to imbibe?
Okay. Um, I would say today we are talking definitely about digital skills and social intelligence, because this is the way in which we are working, especially after the pandemic, where there is a remote working which is happening. So being very equipped to use the different digital tools, and also knowing very well how to use the social media is also very important, because a lot of times we may go and in the initial days, if you look at it in Facebook, we may mark a comment and it may not be taken so differently, because we are also meeting people or we are talking to people face to face. But today, everything is dependent on social media for communication or digital skills. So we also have to be cautious about how we try to really use this and leverage it to the best manner possible. The other skills that I would definitely say, I think a couple of things I did want to share was there was this People Matter conference where I had attended a session by Josh Bersin again. And he actually called these skills as power skills. And he said, these are the future skills. So I would definitely want to share my learning here. Things like, optimism, the curiosity, tenacity, flexibility, learning, empathy, kindness, compassion, forgiveness, patience, and even resilience. These are some qualities that he really mentioned, which are power skills. And I can see them too. I could resonate every one of them. For example, if you have people who are working, and you, as if you're normally working in an office environment, you can always walk up to a person and say, oh, I need this point of maybe you have forgotten to give it to me, or probably you might want to share. But that's not just possible in a remote working area. I mean, for example, we don't know what's happening in the other place. I had a very another instance I can share, a real time. I was an auditor very recently to as an internal auditor for a function that we were doing for the compliance audit. And strangely, there were two people supposed to be there. One person could not connect, the other person was there. And when I was asking, and I could see that he was on leave, I could notice the icon saying out of office, and he was still there for the audit. So first thing I did was I said, actually told him that, thank you very much for coming, even though you are on leave. And he said, no, I wanted to be here. By the way, my colleague could not join. I said, I saw an out of office and you're still here. He said, I'm sorry, actually my uncle passed away, but I felt this was because my colleague could not join. I wanted to join and do. I was really, really taken aback. I mean, I would not have expected somebody who was going through a lot of difficulty. Obviously, they could not go to the place, or obviously they were mourning, but they could not really move out of the house. But a person who's coming over there, first thing I asked him was, do you want me to postpone this? Because it's okay. I understand where you're coming from. And he said, no, it's just a matter of 30 minutes. I'll definitely be here since I cannot go to the place or be with the person. And it really took me by surprise on which it was coming. So that's where I realized also that, all these empathy, kindness, compassion is definitely required, because we don't know why a person, what is happening on the other side, especially in the remote working conditions. So these are, to me, the future skills and competencies, especially if you're working remotely or working from home in future. A lot of us should probably learn and imbibe.
All right. So another question coming your way, Sujatha, and I
Sure.
think you highlighted a little bit of this in your first answer. So what are the skills required to thrive in a VUCA world? If you can first help us understand what you mean by VUCA, and then help us understand what are the skills required to
Sure.
thrive.
Okay. VUCA stands for volatility, uncertainty, complexity, and ambiguity. So the pace of change is extremely high at this point of time. That is volatility. Because of the uncertainty that is there, there's a lack of predictability in the entire environment. So we are not able, today we plan for something, and the moment we start our day, maybe there is a mail, there is a change, and suddenly everything gets changed. So that lack of predictability is very high again in current. When you have these two environments, obviously things are not anymore simple, they're very complex, and it becomes into a chaotic environment. And that again leads to the ambiguity part, which is the haziness of reality. Now that, along with the disruption which is caused by the pandemic, and the other factors which may be there in the environment, is really impacting every person's work, the organization's work, all of that. And we definitely need to thrive on that. And you asked a very good question in terms of what are the mindsets that should be there. I'll at least, I wouldn't be able to say what are those 10 things, but I can share from my experience what I feel they are. To me, I feel the first and foremost thing is the adaptive mindset. So what helps us in anticipating what our customers require, or for me, the customers are my team members, my organizational people in the organization. And so therefore, what is it that they need to develop as a skill, especially in this agile manner, which they need to do to be able to provide creative solutions? So I need to keep asking this myself 10 times, even before I start creating a solution, saying, okay, let me go back and do something, because is that practical in today's world, is the first thing that I need to ask. So that adaptive mindset to me is very, very important. Second is having a very clear vision and purpose. That helps, as I said, in providing a direction in, and making those course corrections. For example, when the pandemic struck and we were all working from home, obviously many of the organizations would have undergone a time where budgets are all on at least wherever you don't need to use money, we should not be, we would go as a conservative mode, budgets are frozen. And what do? Should we stop learning just because we don't have anything? So the question then came to my mind was, okay, how can I still provide whatever is available? I did my research and I really figured out that lots of organizations, lots of companies who were offering learning modules, they were all providing a lot of free courses. And I tried to literally curate and try and help bring in whatever was available to our people so that they could at least learn during this time, because this was a time where people also should be deflected from the mindset of becoming very negative, because when you don't have help at home, you have small children to take care, you have elderly people at home, it is not possible for you to focus on work and then perform well. So that also causes a lot of I mean, it's more about the wellness of a person, physically, mentally, financially, and socially. So keeping all that in mind, sometimes, having these programs also help you to really focus on certain things. And when you hear somebody else's problem, you feel our problem is less, and that also helps. So these things, if you keep in mind and then provide a program accordingly, people actually then get better engaged. So that's one another point. Second thing is also, I also started looking at having that strategic foresight. Tomorrow, if we have to continue working like this, what are the 10 things I may need to be able to support people without really losing sight of the current realities which were there? So that I would call is more again like an abundance mindset that one should have. But most importantly, I think as leaders, as any person, I mean, every person is a leader at their own level. As leaders, we also should be self-aware of ourselves. What are our strengths? Where can we play to our strengths? What are some of our blind spots, and what is it that we can do? And accepting our blind spots is the most important thing, so that we can complement it with our team members. Wherever they are good at, we step behind and ask them to lead, and where they are having problems, we go back and volunteer help. The other thing which I think is a skill set that people should be able to do is an agile learner mindset. Because today, unlike my earlier days, I think when I started with the computers with an IIT, most of us used to think that, okay, after these 2 years, I will either become an architect or I would become a project manager, or there was a specific role that you had in mind. Today, it's not like that. Sometimes you get a project, you are doing everything end to end, which means you're playing multiple hats. That also means that you need to really seek out opportunities, try to do things, experiment and learn quicker. And that essentially means you also have to accept those failures. So, as they say, fail faster and learn better. That's something that helps you to be more open-minded. You are able to listen to people, your peers, your cohorts. You also look at those experiential learning, immersiveness in terms of trying to do something and what works, what does not work. So that is an agile learner mode that one can be. And then, of course, I would say networking, collaborating. In the past few months, I've actually attended a lot of conferences or master classes. I make I make time that I probably end up working even over the weekends or maybe extra hours, but I try to go back and see whether I can attend those master classes, because it's, for me, I feel it's so much of learning from different people coming from various areas, industries, their experiences, cultures, and that brings in a lot of knowledge of different ideas of what you can also implement. So that collaboration and networking is important. I would also say customer centricity, as we were saying, changes in the needs of customer, and therefore how can we provide the best to them. So delighting the customer, if you are looking at it, being transparent, talking to people, and trying to send, that's another mindset and that attribute that we need to really have. I remember manufacturing sector has really gone into a big lull period, especially when the COVID started. They're slowly picking up. But we also in our organization have a wing, a vertical on manufacturing. But one of the beautiful things that we had was our customers actually, people after signing off the contracts, they did not take it away. They only said that we would like to delay it after some time. So that is again a good transparency that, between a customer, the bonding, the relationship that would come in. So customer centricity is another important thing. I think also communication above everything is very, very important, where it is authentic, it's transparent, it's clear. People, especially if you're not face to face, you can see the expressions, or you talk to people, the tone. All of these are very important, and it has to be taken extreme care when you're in the digital mode, when you're just speaking on a phone, or communicating with people. We don't know how another person is going to read an email and then see how things are. So these are definitely attributes that or the skills that people need to develop, I feel, in to thrive in the VUCA world.
All right. So there's one question from the audience, and we'll take it up.
Sure.
So this person wants to know, and is curious to know actually, your learning initiatives which you have taken up.
In the organization?
Yes, I think throughout your career, and if you can highlight your most favorite one, if there is one.
About my career, okay. My career is very interesting. I would say I started off as a faculty with Brilliance Computer Center, and I was teaching Clipper and I think DBase at those days. Windows had just not come yet. I was also a student with an IT at that point of time. So one part of me was a student, one part was literally going and teaching for 2 years till the time I completed that. It was there. Then after that, I moved on to technical coordination role, where I was, those days, quality assurance was just coming up. So mostly it was into the testing mode. If you were to say, you have to create a lot of documents along with it was more like a manual that you give it to the customers. So one had to literally proofread it, see whether all the features have been there. So those were the type of things that I was doing. And I literally spread myself. The first 5 years, I really wanted to spread myself and not keep myself into one area. So whatever opportunity I got, I really went in. So I also became the facilitator for the process trainings. I was actually nominated as a quality facilitator for one of the largest wing which was there. And that gave me a lot of exposure to quality. And this is a field where you become really methodical. You become very observant, because you do have to do audits. You need to find out how people are doing things. It's not just about finding faults per se. It is more about also recommending improvements. So you really need to get into understanding about the business. That gave me a larger picture about end to end of an organization, what happens. But my passion for learning never left. So I used to take sessions also, whether it was soft skills or leadership. And slowly I moved into learning. For 12 years, I was there into quality. And I was also implementing people CMM, which had to be, we were working very closely with HR. And from there on, I took on learning and development and knowledge management in multiple organizations. So I really have been going through learning things. I really like to go back and see what is not there. If everybody goes in one route, I'm one person who will take a most difficult route and try to prove myself. Uh, Maybe that's a challenge which I like, but in the process, I land up learning. So one of the key things I do is, even today, when I get up pretty early and I start off my day early. But the first half an hour, I don't really get into any of the emails or anything, but I read up something and continue to learn. That could be anything related with learning and development or leadership or any other business trends which is happening. But that's how I actually move across into take up my own learning, I would say.
All right. Your learning, by the way, is quite evident from the beautiful bookcase you have behind, and I see a variety of books.
Thank you.
All right. So let's go to the next question.
Sure.
What is the difference between competency-based learning versus traditional ways of learning?
Okay. So let me think of an example over here to make you understand. So initially, if you're saying competency building per se, so let's say take an example of a leadership, somebody who's moving into a leadership role. Normally, every organization would have certain competencies defined or skill sets which is required. And how do they move from a basic level to an advanced to a proficient? It could be on leadership, it could be on technology domain, any of this, but any area, there would be a movement from a basic to proficient to advanced to expert. Now, in today's situation, as I said, there is no time for really putting in, and you also need to apply to be able to do. So there are different methods that you bring in wherein people can start applying. So for example, you do give them a concept of what is there in the class, and then you ask them how to go and apply it within their projects in a manner that they can do. And the next class, probably you're trying to discuss on how did you do it, what went well, what did not go well. And if you have a cohort of 5, 6, 10 people, you're getting actually ideas from each person, and each person's experience is different. And that's the beauty of the diversity and inclusivity that comes in over here. Beyond which, what we do is, once the concepts are, they know how to apply the concepts that has been taught, we take up something called action learning project. So this is a real time problem which may be existing in an organization, in a project, and you're trying to solve it as a cohort. So you have to really start putting yourself outside of the problem, start thinking where can you really bring in the external research content, or what is happening externally, what is happening internally, how do we bring in a better creativity and innovativeness into it. This is how you can build up, because when they're thinking about all this, their experiences are changing from just having a learning to just being applying it, and then also trying to really make sure that there is an impact. So that process is what I would say is changed when it comes to the current times.
All right. And would you choose one over the other?
You mean to say the approach?
Yeah.
I think in current times, we don't have any other choice but the secondary one, because the more faster you do, you will have to deliver. It is not a time where I can really choose. There are organizations, and we do some of the programs which may be year long driven, which could be there. But in any case, there are certain things that people may need to be able to, apply quickly. So we connect it up with, coachings, one-on-one coaching. You may have psychometric instruments which help them understand, create an awareness about their personality, how to accept another person. Things like, emotional intelligence, for example. I may be a particular person who's more introvert in nature, where I don't want to go back. I want to be prepared before going somewhere. Whereas there may be people who are very extempo. You give them 4 points and they can talk. So how do we merge these two concepts and mindsets together? So I think in today's current world, it's more about learning quickly and being able to perform, because that's what the world is moving into.
All right. So we have another question from the audience. This person is saying that he or she is working in a fashion industry, which means that I have more women colleagues than men colleagues.
Okay.
What kind of learning initiatives would you recommend for me to enable my colleagues?
I think first and foremost, it's not a question of men versus women for me, if I were to say, because it's good to have a balance, definitely, because you get different ways of thinking. But to enable people, first of all, it's good to understand what are their aspirations, what is it that they want to know about, or what are their challenges, and accordingly. So learning is not something for me. It's not like a curated content that I give somebody and say, okay, you learn to do this. But because each person's skill sets are different, sometimes you can even have conversations where people bring out a challenge, or they say, oh God, this is the way I did it, and is there a better way? That could be one way where you involve other people to talk about the same experiences which are there. So that becomes more like knowledge sharing. At the same point of time, you're learning from different perspectives. So that's one way of doing it. But I would certainly say, to enable people around you, the advice that I would share, or what I would do if I were in that place, is understand what are their needs, and accordingly build up topics which can help them grow. So for example, somebody's aspiration is to design, then it is more relevant to have a design type of a course to help them. Someone likes to actually showcase certain things, maybe into modeling and trying to implement or do certain other activities, then that is a part that building up the confidence or trying to say what is most important to demonstrate would be certain activities that you may want to train them into.
All right. Another question from the audience.
Okay.
It's a very, very intriguing and interesting one.
Okay.
Uh, so, what if someone has a learning disability and they haven't specified which learning disability they are talking about? Uh, so, the question goes on: how do we make sure that you have programs which cater to their needs, people with learning disabilities? Keep in mind, we have 2 or 3 people, and our entire organization is 100 plus employees. I think what they're trying to say is there are very few people with learning disability, but they want to be inclusive. So the learning initiative which we are designing, how to cater to all the employees equally.
Okay, great. Very, very interesting. I mean, I have had a person with whom I work. Let me just give you a simple thing. He used to do a lot of program management aspects. So if there is something which is an initiative between different departments and coming and doing, I never realized that this person was not even able to move out of his bed because of I would say disability came to him because of an accident, but he was extremely good. And so what he used to do was, at one point of time, he said, Sujatha, can you please hold on? I need to refix my voice because I hear and then I don't type. He cannot type. So it was more with, speaking ability on the word that, if you speak and it gets translated. So he used to use all of that. So understanding that, I went on in a very softer mode in a sense. I would say not softer is not the right word, in a very slow mode than speaking fastly, because that helps him to understand and look at it. So when you're building up contents, I think it's important to have accessibility built in. That's the terminology said when you're having the content, so that a person who is unable to see visually can also feel, I mean, they can actually understand with the translation as to what that picture is or what are you trying to showcase, and so on and so forth. So that really brings in that one element where the accessibility part is there. Second is creating an awareness, including them. I think people should be able to accept. That's the one thing that we need to have for people who are with the normal tendencies which are there. At the same point of time, enable them to have some coaching sessions, one-on-one, where their pace is there, because people learn in different manner. So if you understand that learning styles, and I'll take a moment to explain that with an example. Let's say that somebody gives you a mobile which is very, very costly, and you are getting it for the first time. Now, some of us who are very tech savvy will just open it and start doing some activity and learn. So that's more of activity mode training that is there. Some of us are people who would say, okay, can you please show me what, Regina, you have the same mobile. Can you show me how it works? So I'm more observant. Okay. I like to observe. I like to do it first the correct way so that I get more confidence. Third could be like my dad when he was alive. He would pick up, keep the mobile aside and read the entire manual full from first to the end to understand what is there, so that he doesn't make a mistake, and he is very careful about it. So more of a theorist type of a person. And the other is more of questioning, which is more to do with pragmatism as to what am I trying to do using particular thing. So they like to understand that outcomes. Similar things modes are there with these people as well. If there are disabilities, some of them might want to listen more, or some of them may want to talk to people. It depends upon the disability, which I am not sure what they are trying to say, but based on it, you may want to have, if they are able to converse with people, then it should be a mode where you have a cohort and you allow the people to come and talk, and they can listen and probably speak to them if they are not able to see, or if they cannot listen. I mean, if probably if they cannot hear, then it could be more of visual type of modes that you can create, wherein they can see the things and understand it better. So those are some of the ways I would say to create the content and make them inclusive.
All right. And also, right now we have technology at our hands, so you can actually create different learning modes, and they can take their own pace in learning. But
Absolutely. Yeah.
that was really an interesting question, and we would like to hear more such questions. So the next question for the evening is, what is your advice for returning mothers?
Okay.
uh, I have come back from a 3-year break. So, which course should I take to upskill myself? And before you answer that, Sujata, I would request this participant to tell us her profession, because that will make the
Yeah.
answer fruitful. But anyway, take a dab at it.
That's true. I mean, it depends on, I was just about to say the same thing, which field you are in. If you are going into, let's say, an IT field, it's better to understand what, if it's a programmer. We've had situations in certain organizations, different organizations, where people, we've had situations where we invited people after, having a baby and they've settled down and to come back. There are organizations which also built in and help them to do the different courses so that they can get into the different areas. It really, the answer depends upon the area which they are specializing. So if it is into IT, then you may want to see what are the latest technologies where people are working in. So it again depends upon the interest of the person. If it's data, then you have a data engineer role, or you have different other roles which are there. But broadly, I would suggest that there are various courses available, in free courses available in edx.org, or different MOOC which are there. I mean, the massive open universities which are available, and one can actually go back and check on the latest ones there. But knowing a lot of digital skills definitely helps. It's simple things. I'm not saying about learning everything, but what is an AI, or what is machine learning, or what is blockchain. There are various small ones which are literally available. That will also help to see, in whichever industry they are going in, how can these technologies really help, because that's where the movement is moving towards. So that is one thing I would strongly say, that have some of the digital skills, and then of course, based on the industry, then you may have to look at what is in vogue currently and then take a course accordingly. But there are various courses. Anyone can definitely, if you want, you can write down, my email is also there. The LinkedIn contact is there. So I can always help them with some of these site addresses at any point.
So she has written back and she says she is an HR professional.
HR professional. Okay. HR, I think today it is more onto data driven concepts which are there, analytics. These are few things which are really coming up. So learning about how a data can help people, analytics is one area which could be there, or people engagement, which is also taking a lot of change in current situations, where engagement, if you're not in the organization, how do you engage remotely is another key question which a lot of people are asking. So these are areas which definitely a person can understand and then come into.
All right. So the last question for the evening, and before I say that, I would like to remind everybody that this session will be available on YouTube. So do follow us on our YouTube handle. Uh, Stay tuned for more such interesting sessions throughout this month. As I told you when we began this session, we're gonna bring more L&D leaders to the forefront, and we're gonna take up interesting, intriguing topics for you. In fact, we would be happy to get into a conversation with you. Write to us at hello@inclusify.io, and we would be happy to take any query or just get into a conversation. Um, so the last question for the evening is, what all competencies are required for an inclusive leader? Oh, this is one of the hot topics which I think is going on in the D&I industry.
I think that was a great question, I must say, because with inclusion, organizations are able to capture the competitive advantage of the changing demographics and of the workplace, as well as what is there in the marketplace. Definitely, there's a global perspective which is happening, where cultural agility and self-awareness, openness, flexibility, all of these aspects are coming through. from an innovation, because you're not doing the work the same way we used to do. We are looking at various other approaches towards even the work. So creativity and innovation being there, one definitely needs to have a diverse point of view. That is very, very important, because people coming from various cultures, generations, gender diversity, or anything that you take, really brings in a lot of different point of view over here. Then again, driving change, that's the most important thing. Every day something else happens. So how are you able to really inspire and motivate the people in this dynamic environment, uh, especially in the unprecedented diverse teams that we have? And of course, last but not the least, the growth leaders. How do you grow leaders into the organization? Designing the different products for the changing markets or the needs of our customers. But the skill set definitely needs to get upgraded. So there's a lot of talk today about reskilling, upskilling, upscaling, or cross skilling for that matter, to be able to really cater to the needs of the world. So those are key aspects. I definitely want to bring in one aspect over here, which I read from one of the articles. I don't remember. Probably it's Deloitte again, but this spoke about inclusive leaders. How do they drive the organizational growth? And it was beautifully said that, the biggest challenge today we have is creating the growth, because a lot of roles are changing, a lot of skill sets are changing. So creating that growth itself is a challenge. And to have the growth, you need to differentiate. Of course, we need to stand out and say, what is it that we are trying to bring within our organization, or the creating value part of it. To differentiate, of course, we need to innovate and be creative. To innovate, we need diversity. To activate that diversity, we need inclusion. And to manage all this, we need inclusive leadership. That's what I would like to say, and then conclude this part.
All right, Sujatha, thank you so much for giving us your time and your valuable insights. Uh, Thank you, everybody, for attending this session. Do stay tuned for another section next week, and we'll see you all soon.
Thank you very much, Regina, and thanks for the opportunity to Inclusify also. It was wonderful. It's a pleasure being here and sharing whatever little I know. And I'm hoping that anyone who wants to reach out to me, please do so on LinkedIn or anywhere. And I'll be happy to help wherever I can. Thank
Sure.
you. Have a
Thank
nice day.
you. You too.